Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Old fart here, just farting around. I got Winky with me here today. Hey Winky, could get a high five for the folks at home? Oh yeah, and a kiss. Good boy. All right.
Oh, you're so
Another one?
cute.
Well, today,
yes,
my top 10 list I'm proud to bring to you is 10 people that go by their initials. 10 people that go by their initials. I'm sure you could think of some. I got 5 that you may know and 5 that you may not know. And we'll go ahead and start. The music that you're hearing right now is the Pepitones, and it's called The Wanda's Magic Organ is the name of the song. And we'll go ahead with number 1. And number 1, E.E. Cummings. E.E. Cummings was an American poet, painter, essayist, author, and playwright. During World War I, he worked as an ambulance driver and was imprisoned in an intern camp, which provided the basis for his novel, The Enormous Room. The following year, he published his first collection of poetry, Tulips and Chimneys, which showed his early experiments with grammar and typography. He wrote 4 plays, the most successful of which were Him in 1927 and Santa Claus, A Morality in 1946. He wrote E.I.M.I. in 1933, which is a travelogue of the Soviet Union and delivered to Charles Eliot Norton lectures in poetry. In 1965, he did Fairy Tales, which is a collection of short stories and was published posthumously after he passed. Cummings, he wrote 2,900 different poems. He was regarded as one of the most important American poets in the 20th century. He's associated with modernist free-form poetry as much as his work used idiomatic syntax and lowercase spellings, which really expressed a lot of his poetry. In 1952, his alma mater, Harvard University, awarded him an honorary seat as a guest professor. The Charles Eliot Norton lectures he gave in 1952 and 1955 were later collected, and he spent the last decade of his life traveling, fulfilling different speaking engagements, spending time at his summer home, Joy Farm, in Silver Lake, New Hampshire, and he finally went back to be with our Creator on September 3rd, 1962 at age 67, and that was in New Hampshire as well. He was buried in Forest Hills Cemetery in Boston, Massachusetts, and at the time of his passing, he was recognized as the second most widely read poet in the United States at that time. So hopefully this does bring a little bit more recognition to E.E. Cummings than what's out there right now, because I didn't know much of anything at all, other than I heard the name maybe once or twice. So I hope you guys got some more education and information about who E.E. Cummings was. All right, and that brings us to number 2. And number 2, William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, also known as W.E.B. Du Bois or W.E.B. Du Bois. He was an American sociologist, writer, a historian, and a Pan-Africanist civil rights activist. He was born in the Great Barrington, which is in Massachusetts, and he grew up relatively tolerant in an integrated community. After completing his graduate work at Harvard University, where he was literally the first African American to earn a doctorate, and he rose to national prominence as leader of the Niagara movement. That was really popular and well known, and that was a group of African American civil rights activists that were seeking equal rights at the time. Du Bois and his supporters opposed the Atlantic Compromise, and instead he insisted on full civil rights and increased political representation, which he believed would be brought about by the African American intellectual elite. He referred to his group as the Talented Tenth, a concept under the umbrella of racial uplift, and believed that African Americans needed the chance for advanced education to develop their leadership. Du Bois was one of the founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which was the NAACP in 1909, and he used his position in the NAACP to respond to different racist incidents. After the First World War, he attended the Pan-African Congresses and embraced socialism and became a professor at Atlanta University. Once the Second World War ended, he engaged in peace activism and was targeted by the FBI. He spent the last year of his life in Ghana, and he went back to his creator on August 27th, 1963. All right, and number 3 on our list is W.C. Handy. W.C. Handy, he's also known as William Christopher Handy. He was born November 16th, 1873, and he was an American composer and musician who referred to himself as the father of the blues. He was one of the most influential songwriters in the United States, one of many musicians who played the distinctly American blues music. He did not create the blues genre, but was one of the first to publish music in the blues form, thereby taking the blues from a regional music style known as the Delta Blues with a limited audience to a new level of popularity. Handy used elements of folk music in his compositions. He was scrupulous in documenting the sources of his work, which frequently combined stylistic influences from various performers. And in 1938, a radio episode of Ripley's Believe It or Not, Handy was described as the father of jazz as well as the blues. Fellow blues performer Jelly Roll Morton wrote an open letter to Down Reel magazine, fuming that he had invented jazz. And after the publication of his autobiography, Handy published a book on African American musicians titled Unsung Americans Sung in 1944. He wrote 3 other books: Blues, an anthology, Complete Words and Music of 53 Great Songs, books of Negro spirituals, and Negro authors and composers of the United States. He lived on Strivers Row in Harlem. He became blind after an accidental fall from a subway platform in 1943. But in 1943, until after his death, he lived in Yonkers, New York. His grandson is the physicist Carlos Handy, who was born in 1950, who now leads the Handy Brothers Music Company. After the death of his first wife, he remarried in 1954 when he was 80. And unfortunately, he went back to his creator on March 28, 1958, and he passed from bronchial pneumonia at Sydenham Hospital in New York City. Over 25,000 people attended his funeral in Harlem's Abyssinian Baptist Church, and over 150,000 people gathered in the streets near the church to pay their respects. He was buried in Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. Much thanks to Handy and his work. He really was talented. All right, and that'll bring us to number 5. We'll let Winky do number 4. Wink? Wink? Ugh, he's sleeping on the job.
At least I know which number we're on. I'm trying to get some damn sleep over here.
I guess I'll have to get his notes. Hopefully I can read them. All right. All right. Okay.
What the is this piece of?
So this is E.G. Williams, everybody's guess Marshall, the U.S. actor. And Marshall didn't want to divulge his real given name, so that's what he would tell everyone who asked him what his name was. He was born June 18th, 1914. He was known professionally as E.G. Marshall, and he was an American actor. He was one of the first groups selected for the New Actors Studio, and by 1948, he had performed in major plays on Broadway. Some of his roles that he's best known for is the unflappable and analytical Juror Number 4 in Sidney Lumet's courtroom drama, 12 Angry Men. He starred in the CBS legal drama The Defenders and played the President of the United States in Superman 2 in 1980. He was known also as the host of the radio drama series CBS Radio Mystery Theater from 1974 to 1982. He was born Everett Eugene Grunz in Owatonna, Minnesota, the son of Hazel Irene and Charles Grunz. During his life, he chose not to reveal his name, and he wanted to tell everyone that it stood for everyone's guess. The U.S. Social Security Index claims that he was listed with them in June 1937 as Everett Eugene Gruns, and in 1975, E.G. Marshall. He claimed in interviews later on in his life to have attended Carleton College and University of Minnesota, but they didn't have much evidence that he attended there or any college at all. But he took the surname Marshall for his acting career, and although most familiar for his later television and movie roles, which gained wide audiences, he also had a distinguished Broadway career, and in 1948 performed the original New York production of The Skin of Our Teeth and The Iceman Cometh. He joined Marlon Brando, Montgomery Clift, Julie Harris, Kim Stanley, and 45 others to make up the first group of actors granted membership in the newly formed Actors Studio. And in years after that, he landed leading roles in The Crucible and Waiting for Godot. And that'll bring us to number 5.
You sure about that? You sure about that? You sure about that?
All right, and number 5, B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner, born March 20th, 1904, he was an American psychologist, behaviorist, inventor, and social philosopher. He was the Edgar Pierce Professor of Psychology at Harvard University from 1948 till he retired in 1974. He developed behavior analysis, especially the philosophy of radical behaviorism, founded the Experimental Analysis of Behavior, a school of experimental research psychology, and he also used operant conditions to strengthen behavior, considering the rate of response to be the most effective measure of response strength.
I can't understand a word you said the whole time.
To study operant conditioning, he invented operant conditioning chamber, also known as the Skinner box, and to measure rate, he invented the cumulative recorder. And these tools that he invented, he and Charles Foerster produced Skinner's most influential experimental work outlined in the 1957 Schedules of Reinforcement. Skinner, John Watson, and Ivan Pavlov are considered to be the most influential pioneers of modern behaviorism. In 2002, a survey listed Skinner as the most influential psychologist of the 20th century. He did receive a lot of criticism in his life, and I'm not going to talk too much about that, but Noam Chomsky, who was a pretty famous linguist, said that after he published a review of Skinner's verbal behavior in the Linguistics journal Language in 1959, he argued that Skinner's attempt to use behaviorism to explain human language amounted to little more than word games. Conditioned responses could not account for a child's ability to create or understand an infinite variety of novel sentences. Chomsky's review has been credited with launching the cognitive revolution in psychology and other disciplines. Skinner, who rarely responded directly to critics, never formally replied to Chomsky's critique, but endorsed Kenneth McCordecai's 1972 reply. But that's pretty much it. And with that, we'll move on to number 6. And number 6, B.F. Goodrich. B.F. Goodrich was born in the farming town of Ripley, New York on November 4th, 1841. He was the son of Anson Goodrich and Susanna, and he was orphaned at the age of 8 and raised by his uncle. He received his doctorate from Cleveland Medical College, now known as Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine, and in 1861 he studied surgery at the University of Pennsylvania. In 1863, and served as a battlefront surgeon for the Union Army in the Civil War with the rank of captain. After a few years in a struggling medical practice, he went to work in Pennsylvania's oil fields and became a real estate speculator. After the war, he reached a licensing agreement with Charles Goodyear and bought the Hudson River Rubber Company in partnership with J.P. Morris in 1869. The company, located in Melrose, New York, failed. The following year, he accepted an offer of $13,600 from the citizens of Akron, Ohio, to relocate his business there. He founded Goodrich II and Company in 1870, and he bought out II, and in 1880, the company became the B.F. Goodrich Company. Goodrich was the first in Akron to ever own a telephone, which was a gift from Alexander Graham Bell in 1877, and the telephone connected Goodrich's house on Quaker Street to his factory on Rubber Street. According to a story, Goodrich had seen a friend's home burn to the ground, with firefighters rendering helpless because their leather hoses had frozen and cracked. Once settled in Akron, Goodrich ordered his company to begin producing cotton-wrapped rubber hose that would resist freezing, and a few years later, he started selling garden hoses and bicycle tires. Still, the company teetered near bankruptcy and went through numerous name changes, and its success was still uncertain when he passed at the age of 46 in 1888. But the business really began booming a few years after his death with the company's introduction of a pneumatic tire that could endure the speed and load of evolving automobiles. And the radial tire was designed by an advertising employee in his company, and over subsequent decades, the Goodrich Company chemists invented plasticized polyvinyl chloride, which is also known as PVC, and that was in 1926, and then in 1937 synthesized rubber. And they also built spacesuits for NASA in the 60s, and now it's renamed the Goodrich Corporation, and they abandoned the tire business in 1988, and subsequently after that described itself as a global supplier of systems and services. And on November 4th, 1869, Goodrich was married to Mary Elizabeth Marvin, a daughter of the U.S. Representative Richard Pratt Marvin and Isabella Marvin. Her uncle, William Marvin, was once a federal judge in the United States and the 7th governor of Florida. And he unfortunately went back to our Creator on August 3rd, 1888 in Manitou Springs, Colorado, where he had hopes in improving his health. He was buried at the Lakeview Cemetery in Jamestown, New York, and after his passing, his wife hired architect Gary Lowell, also known as Guy Lowell, in 1905 to design a 23-room mansion known as River House in York, Maine. And that brings us to number 7 on our list. Looks like my co-host fell asleep over here. Right, and number 7 is J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan. All right, and J.P. Morgan. All right, and J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan, born April 17th, 1837. He was an American financier and investment banker who dominated corporate finance on Wall Street throughout the Gilded Age and Progressive era. As the head of the banking firm that ultimately became J.P. Morgan Chase & Company, he was a driving force behind the wave of industrial consolidations in the United States at the turn of the 20th century. Over the course of his career at Wall Street, Morgan spearheaded the formation of several prominent multinational corporations, including U.S. Steel, International Harvester, and General Electric. He and his partner also held controlling interests in numerous other American businesses, including Aetna, Western Union, the Pullman Company, and 21 railroads. His grandfather, Joseph Morgan, was one of the co-founders of Aetna. Through his holdings, Morgan exercised enormous influence over capital markets in the United States. During the Panic of 1907, he organized a coalition of financiers that saved American monetary systems from collapse. And it's said in the newspaper on March 31st, 1913, that Morgan fell ill to a long sinking spell which included symptoms of extreme weakness, nervousness after his realization of the inability to take in food due to a paralysis of the muscles in his throat. No other organic trouble was present, and when he tried to speak, contraction of his throat followed. As his condition worsened, he was in and out of consciousness, and when they gave him food, had to be through an injection. Morgan was traveling abroad and died on March 31st, 1913 in his sleep at the Grand Hotel Plaza in Rome, Italy. His body was brought back to America on the SS France, which is a French line, Flags on Wall Street flew at half-staff in an honor usually reserved for heads of state. The stock market closed for 2 hours when his body passed through New York City. His body was brought to lie in his home, an adjacent library, the first night of arrival in New York City, and his remains were interred in the Cedar Hill Cemetery in his birthplace of Hartford, Connecticut. His son, John Piermont, also known as Jack, inherited the banking business, and his estate was worth $68.3 million, of which about was $30 million represented his share in the New York and Philadelphia banks. The value of his art collection was estimated at $50 million. That's really incredible. That's a real nice way to honor him, and he was a really successful man. That's really, really incredible that he was able to do all that in such a short life. All right, and that brings us to number 8. One of my favorites, actually, is J.C. Penney. J.C. Penney was born September 16th, 1875, and he was an American businessman and entrepreneur who founded J.C. Penney's in 1902. When he was born on a farm right outside of Hamilton, Missouri, the 7th of 12 children, only 6 who lived to adulthood. He was born to James Cash Penney and Mary Frances. Penney's father was a Baptist preacher and farmer whose strict discipline included making his son pay his own clothing once he reached the age of 8. After graduating from Hamilton High School, Penney intended to attend college with the hopes of becoming a lawyer. His father's untimely death, however, forced a change in plans, and Penney was forced to work as a store clerk to help support the family. Penney's tuberculosis caused him to venture west to Longmont, Colorado. But in 1898, he began working for a small chain of stores in the western United States called the Golden Rule Stores. And in 1902, the owners, Guy Johnson and Thomas Callahan, impressed by his work ethic and salesmanship, offered him a 1/3 partnership in a new store he would open. Penney invested $2,000 and moved to Kemmerer, Wyoming, to open a store there. He participated in opening 2 more stores, and when Callahan and Johnson dissolved their partnership in 1907, he purchased full interest in all 3 stores. By 1912, there were 34 stores in the Rocky Mountain states. In 1913, he moved the company from the Kearns building in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. The company was incorporated under the new name J.C. Penney Company. J.C. Penney was married 3 times, and his first marriage was to Berta Alva Hess in 1889, produced 2 sons before she passed from pneumonia. He lived in New York City at 888 Park Avenue, though he spent winters in Palm Springs, California. Because who wants to be in New York City when it's really, really cold all the time? It is nice during Christmas and during holidays, but it could get really, really cold. In 1970, on December 26, Penney fell and fractured his hip. A few weeks later, he suffered a heart attack and never fully recovered, and he went back to our Creator on February 12, 1971, in New York City. Norman Vincent Peale delivered the eulogy at the funeral. Penney was buried in the Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, New York City, and wasn't that far from fellow retail entrepreneur F.W. Woolworth. And his estate was valued at approximately $35 million. All right. And that brings us to number 9 on our list. Number 9 is J.R.R. Tolkien.
The fuck? What are we doing here? I don't know.
J.R.R. Tolkien was born John Ronald Reuel Tolkien on January 3, 1892, and was an English writer and philologist. He was the author of the high fantasy works The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. From 1925 to 1945, he was Rawlinson and Bosworth Professor of Anglo-Saxon and a Fellow of Pembroke College, both at the University of Oxford. He then moved within the same university to become the Merton Professor of English Language and Literature and Fellow of Merton College, and held these positions from 1945 until his retirement in 1959. Tolkien was a close friend of C.S. Lewis and co-member of Inklings, an informal literary discussion group, and he was appointed a Commander Order of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth II on the 28th of March, 1972. After his passing, his son, Christopher, who you may know, published a series of works based on his father's extensive notes and unpublished manuscripts, including The Silmarillion. These, together with The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, formed a connected body of tales, poems, fictional histories, invented languages, and literary essays about a fantasy world called Arda, and within it, Middle-earth. Between 1951 and 1955, Tolkien applied the term legendarium to larger parts of these writings. He's regarded as one of the most influential authors of all time, and he was made a Commander of the Order of British Empire in the 1972 New Year Honors and received the insignia at the Order at Buckingham Palace on March 28, 1972. The same year, Oxford University gave him an honorary Doctor of Letters. When he passed, 21 months after his wife did, on September 2nd, 1973, from a bleeding ulcer and chest infection at the age of 81, he was buried in the same grave with his wife. That's when they added the name Baron to the grave. Tolkien's will was proven on December 20th, 1973, with his estate valued at £190,577.
Because I have $30,000 in credit card debt. When they call, I tell them I can't pay it back yet. Credit card debt.
Which in today's society would be equivalent to £2,454,000, give or take. All right, and number 10 on our list is H.G. Wells. Herbert George Wells, born September 21st, 1866, was an English writer, prolific in many genres. He wrote more than 40 novels and dozens of short stories. His nonfiction output included works of social commentary, politics, history, popular science, satire, biography, and autobiography. Wells is most known today for his groundbreaking science fiction novels, and sometimes has been called the father of science fiction. In addition to his fame as a writer, he was prominent in his lifetime as a forward-looking, even prophetic social critic who devoted his literary talents to the development of a progressive vision on a global scale. As a futurist, he wrote a number of utopian works and foresaw the advent of aircraft, tanks, space travel, nuclear weapons, satellite, television, and something resembling the World Wide Web. His science fiction imagined time travel, alien invasion, invisibility, and biological engineering before these subjects were common in the genre. He was also referred to as the Shakespeare of science fiction by Brian Aldiss. All right, and unfortunately, Wells went back to be with our creator on August 13th, 1946, at age 79, at his home at 13 Hanover Terrace overlooking Regent Park, London. And in his preface to the 1941 edition of The War in the Air, Wells had stated that his epitaph should be, "I told you so, you damned fools." Wells' body was cremated at the Golders Green Crematorium on August 16, 1946, and his ashes were subsequently scattered into the English Channel at Old Harry Rocks, the most eastern point on the Jurassic Coast and about 3.5 miles from Swanage in Dorset. Commemorative blue plaque in his honor was installed by the Greater London Council at his home in Regent's Park in 1966. All right, and that'll be everyone on the list. Thank you so much for watching to this far. Who's your favorite person that you know of? or someone that I didn't mention that you know of that goes by their initials and not their given name, go ahead and put it in the comments and let me know. Also, please share this video with anybody that you know that likes this kind of content, likes top 10 lists, just likes this informative, educational, entertainment stuff in general. And by sharing it and even commenting, what it does is it helps the algorithm. It helps YouTube know that this is good content and it's okay to push this to other people. And that's what I'm really trying to do, is just spread this to everybody. None of this is artificial content. None of this is AI, which is really great, because I think the world is really trying to come back to humans, and they rather deal with humans. And I think it's just better to get your information from a human, not some robot or something that was just typed into the computer. It's more personable, and that's really it. So again, thank you so much for watching. I'm Old Fart, Winky's sleeping, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.